the stuff that happened in between to get us here. So I want to introduce to you Shannon Landry. She's a parent. She's also an MSW student at UNE. She is the Maine-led parent trainee, and she's also the vice president for the Autism Society of Maine. And I'm going to let Shannon introduce herself a little bit more. I'm going to be monitoring the chat box. So if you have questions and you want to ask something, please put it in the chat box, and then I'll chime in and let Shannon know that there's questions in the chat. So without further ado, Shannon, you may go ahead and take over.
Are you sure about that? Welcome, everyone. Thank you. I'm sorry about the snafu with the beginning. Yes, as Kathy said, I am Shannon Landry. I am an MSW student. I am the family trainee for Maine LEND. LEND stands for Leadership, Education, and Neurodevelopmental and Related Disabilities. That is also done at UNE. And as part of my student project for that particular program, I just was hoping to educate people on the path to legislation. We're basically going to talk about how does a bill become a law here in Maine and ways that you can advocate to legislators. So there are three branches of the government. There's the executive, the judicial, and the legislative branch. And here is what each of those branches do. You have your legislative branch. Federally, that is Congress. Here in the state of Maine, we have the state legislature. They both pretty much do the same. They create laws. Obviously Congress creates federal laws, and the state that creates state statutes. For judicial, we have a federal and a state as well. For federal, that is the U.S. Supreme Court and all federal courts, and they interpret the law. Here in the state, we have the state high court and all of the state courts, and they also interpret the law. We have the executive branch, which federally, that would be the president and the vice president and their cabinet. They enforce federal laws. Here in the state of Maine, we have the governor and her cabinet, and they enforce state laws. So for the executive branch, they're responsible for, again, for execution of laws that were created by the legislature. The governor is elected every 4 years, and no individual can serve more than 2 consecutive terms in this office. So there is a link to Governor Mills' website that we're going to go take a peek at. And so this is the office of Governor Janet Mills. I have actually clicked on this little button called Contact. You can share your opinion, request assistance, you can schedule a meeting or event requests, so on. If you do this, it depends on what you're sharing your opinion on or what you're requesting your assistance for. There is usually a little box you click on, like if you want a response, and then somebody generally will respond to you. Not all the time. I've had someone respond to me once or twice. So going back, there is also another link to the governor's cabinet as well. The legislative branch is responsible for making laws. It is here in the state of Maine, we have the Senate and the House of Representatives. There are 35 members who are elected every 2 years for the Senate. And in the House of Representatives, there's 151 members who also get elected every 2 years. We are currently in the 131st session. This session started in December and will end in June. To be exact, June 21st of 2023. So what does this look like? This picture up in the left corner, that is a picture of the Maine State Senate. And the picture up in the right-hand side is a picture of the House of Representatives here in Maine as well. So the Senate is considered the upper chamber of the Maine legislature, and it serves as the final confirming body if bills are passed. And this is like their last stop before they go to the governor. There are 35 senators, as I have mentioned, 22 are Democrats and 13 are Republicans. For the House of Representatives, there is 151 members. 81 are Democrats, 67 are Republicans. There are 2 independents and currently 1 vacancy. There are seats for 3 non-voting members of the Penobscot Nation, the Passamaquoddy tribe, and the Holton Band of Maliseet Indians. This has been in the news lately that they actually would like more of a say. So hopefully maybe those seats will turn into voting members as opposed to non-voting members. But for the purpose of our webinar today, they are non-voting members. There are 3 different legislature committees. There's the Senate Standing Committee, which consists of Senate members. There's the House Standing Committee. Again, it consists of House of Representative members. And there's the Joint Standing Committees, and those consist of both Senate and House members. These are just a few of the Joint Standing Committees. These are not all of them. As I say in the slide, these are just most of the ones we follow here at the Autism Society. There's the Appropriations and Financial Affairs, Criminal Justice and Public Safety, Education and Cultural Affairs. Health and Human Services is a big one that we also follow. Health coverage and insurance and financial services, labor, housing, and transportation. Again, this is not the full list of the committees. These are just the ones we particularly have an interest with within the Autism Society. So how does a bill become a law in Maine? It is very similar to the way it's done federally. So first there's an idea. An idea can come from anyone. It can come from me, you, anyone, advocates, legislators, lobbyists, and the governor. Once a legislator has decided to sponsor the bill, this again can be at the suggestion of a constituent, an interest group such as the Autism Society of Maine or the governor. The legislator may ask other legislators to co-sponsor in either chamber. So I kind of want to frame this, and we have our fake bill and we're starting it, and we have our idea. A legislator's decided that they want to go ahead with it, and we don't know if there's co-sponsors yet. So next, the bill is drafted. At the legislator's discretion, there are 4 legislative offices, and their staff members work to review and provide research and draft the assistance and prepare the bill for its proper technical form. Once the bill is filed, it's given an LR number or a legislative request. That number is used to track the request until it becomes an LD, which is a legislative document, which we're going to take a look at next. So this is what that looks like. And we actually have a piece of legislation that we are following here at the Society. So this is, again, LD number 435. This particular bill with the HP means it started in the House of Representatives. If it had started in the Senate, it would have had an SP number. So this is what the bill is. I mean, this is what they're proposing. And then if you look down towards the bottom, it will tell you presented by Representative Grumlach, and I'm sorry if I just murdered that last name, of Old Orchard Beach. And the co-sponsor is listed here as well. Actually, all of them are listed usually beneath. And if you go, which I do have the link to the legislature website, and look up this particular LD, and sometimes they will have more information on following pages, and sometimes they will not, just so you know. Sometimes it will kind of just look like this. The next page will have a very brief introduction of what it will do, and then that's it. But some will include a lot more information. If there's a particular bill that you have an interest in and it doesn't have a whole lot of information, if it was me, I would reach out to the representative, as I mentioned down here, that they're listed, and you can email them, and I'll show you how to go about doing that. You can mail them, call them, all of their information is available. We'll see that in a little bit. So next, the bill is introduced. The revisor's office is given the bill. The bill then goes to the House, the clerk of the House, or the Secretary of the Senate. So again, going back to our imaginary bill, we'll just say, or we can actually use the one we were just looking at. This one started in the House, so we'll go to the clerk of the House. The bill was numbered, as we just saw, and the recommendation is made. The bill is printed and it's placed on the respective body's calendar. So what that means is it will go on the House's calendar, since our bill started there. It will then be referred to a committee, usually to a joint standing committee. And it will go in the originating branch, meaning so our bill on the prior page started in the House. it will go to the originating branch and sent to other bodies for concurrence, such as the Senate. Next, there will be the committee action. So this is scheduled by the chairs of the committees. The committee will conduct, this is when public hearings will take place, and parents, self-advocates, a special interest group such as the Autism Society, they can go to a public hearing. They will accept testimony supporting or opposing a proposed law. Notice of public hearings are printed in the papers. It's also on the legislature website. Next will be the report of the committee. This is when the bill is reported to the floor and it receives its first reading. And any amendments by the committees are adopted at this time. The committee will report the bill to the originating body. As we had mentioned, the House was where our bill started. With the amendments or divided report, or with the unanimous recommendation of ought not to pass. If the bill, we're saying our bill, it's going on, yay. So it's going to go to the second chamber. So that means it's going to go to the House, and the Senate, and it will go through a similar process. If the second chamber, say in our case, the Senate, decides to amend the bill, it's going back to the House for them to take a look at it and make the changes and make a vote on it. We're going to say, yay, our bill passed. But if not, we're just going to say that it needs to pass. The only way that it gets final approval is when it passes both chambers in identical forms. So it needs to be the same before it can move on. So we're going to say, yay, our bill made it. So now it's going to go to the governor. What happens next? After the final passage, the bill is sent to the governor. The governor has 10 days to either sign or veto the bill. If the governor does not sign the bill and the legislature is still in session, the bill after 10 days becomes law as if the governor signed it. If the legislature is adjourned for the year, the bill does not become law, and this is known as a pocket veto. If the legislature comes back into session, the governor has 3 days in which to deliver a veto to the chamber of origin, or the bill becomes law. Why is this important? Sometimes the governor may or may not be on board with a particular piece of legislation. Therefore, maybe in this case, Governor Mills doesn't want to put her name on it, but it can still go through and be passed. So how long after that does this become law? Generally, it's 90 days. But a bill can become immediately law immediately if the legislature has a 2/3 vote in each chamber, and if it's declared an emergency. If it's an emergency law, it'll take effect on the day the governor signs it, unless otherwise specified. If the bill is vetoed, it will become law if the legislature can override it by 2/3 vote of those members present and voting in each chamber. So now we're going to go on to some really neat resources I feel like we have. I just want to put in that Maine law prohibits legislators from serving more than 4 consecutive terms in either the House or the Senate, and 1 term again is 2 years. So we're going to go take a look at our action center. This is done by the Autism Society of America. And this will cover mostly federal type bills. Because right here, tell your members of Congress to support and respond and so on. There's some bills that the national office is taking a look at, and these are them. So yeah, and there's other ways you can look at campaigns, finding legislators, track legislation, and so on at this particular website. So what does it mean? I mean, so when they vote, and we kept saying vote, to pass. So this is kind of the language you might see if you go to the Maine legislature website. So ought to pass means something passed, and it's going on. Ought not to pass, ought to pass as amended means that it's not in its true form. It got amended somewhere along the way. So it's ought to pass in the amended form. Ought to pass in a new draft means that maybe it started out one way and now we've amended it, and maybe it went back and forth and now it's a new draft. It's a new bill almost. Ought not to pass means it fails. And refer to another committee. When that might happen is, say in the beginning when I mentioned that a bill is assigned to a committee, say our particular bill was assigned to the finance committee, and the finance committee found that that bill doesn't fit finance. So therefore they think it should go on to the Health and Human Services Committee. So it could be, again, referred to another committee, and some of that process starts all over again. So how can you find your local state senator? You just need to know the city or town that you live in to find out. So let's go take a look at what that would look like. So up here, you can click on the letter of your town. I live in Brunswick, so I'm going to click on B, and you just go through by town and find your town. Here's mine. And so here she is. This is my state senator. It has her mailing address, her phone number, both at home and at the house. It has her email address. Has her website. It tells you numbers, that it tells you what committees she is on. So you can go in and do this, and this is a good way that if you wanted to advocate or reach out to a state leader, this is one way to do it for the Senate. And so for House of Representatives, it's a little different to find who your representative is. You can do it, there's a bunch of ways. You can do it by their last name, as it says here. You can do it by seating arrangement, county delegations, and so on. So I happen to know mine should be right there. So this is my representative. This was done by her last name. So again, it has her email address, her mailing address, her phone number, her seat number in the House of Representatives, the district, and again, the town that she serves. These are her committees that she is on. So again, this is another really good way to advocate, reach out to your local leaders. So senators and representatives are just like us. And with that being said, the Autism Society of Maine had Senator Shannon, who is now the Secretary of State, do some videos that basically talk about why get involved and how you can do that. So again, becoming involved, legislative participation sign up. It has a lot of the information that I had already shown, how to find your senator, how to find your representative. And here are the videos. The videos are very short. They're not very long. Who to contact, what is your message? How do you get your message out? Taking it to the next level. This is just another really good resource that the Autism Society offers that you can feel free to use. Why is this important? So going back to advocating, once you find out who your representative or senator is, now what? Well, tell your story, especially if there's a certain piece of legislation that's coming up that may or may not affect you or your family. Going back to Representative Poppy Arford, I have talked her ear off ad nauseum, and she has said that people who tell their story, their personal stories, that weighs very heavily with them. That's what they want to hear. They want to hear from parents. They want to hear from self-advocates. So again, if there's, or, you know, there doesn't necessarily even have to be a piece of legislation coming up. If you just want to reach out about something going on that is very important to you, feel free to do so. Don't, you know, again, they're just like us and they want to hear from us. So on that note, I was lucky with Mainland that we recently met with some staffers from the offices of Senator Angus King, Representative Shelley Pingree, and Representative Jared Golden. How did we do that? Some of us were elected leaders, and we went in and went to these websites that are listed beneath each picture. I happen to be the group leader for Congresswoman Shelley Pingree, so I went to her website. Again, it's almost like the governor's one that I showed you earlier, where you just click on it, click contact. Let's see if we can do that and show you what that looks like. So here it is. This is her office right here. Big old button says contact, which is what I did. Here we go. And this again is her information, her Portland office, Waterville office, and her Washington, D.C. office.
Shannon, we're not seeing that, Shannon.
Oh, hang on. Let me do it again. Sorry. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay, here we go. So let's go back because I don't know how far back that you couldn't see. So this is Congresswoman Shelley Pingree's website. Here's the button I was talking about, contact. Click on it. It will bring you here. This is her office locations, their address and phone numbers, both here in the state and in DC. When I was trying to get a meeting, I clicked on the meeting request and I filled out this form. And basically, I mean, it wants your name, your address. She wants, a lot of them just want to make sure that you're one of their constituents, because the way that Maine is broken up, like Representative Jared Golden tends to cover northern Maine, whereas Shelley Pingree, Representative Pingree covers southern Maine. And a little bit, I know, of northern Maine too. Again, so you would just put in the dates and times that you have available, names and hometowns of attendees, the location. I had picked for mine DC, but we actually did a Zoom meeting. Specifically, what topics do you wish to discuss? So again, we did have pieces of legislation we wanted to talk with her about, so I listed them there. And again, if you go to any of their websites, and they're pretty much all set up the same way. You could do the same thing. If you don't want a meeting, you can send them an email. And these are references and partnerships. Again, Autism Society of Maine. Oh, I would like to show this piece. So a former LEND trainee, well, I guess that would make her a LEND graduate, came up with the postcard project. And this was her student project for that particular year. So what it is you can go in and you can download, here are the directions. You can download a postcard. You can mail the postcard. As I showed you, there were addresses for both state and federal. Yeah, and inside there's a place where you can write a personal note. There's also a place where like you put who you are, like it says name, address, and so forth. You can put a personal message, and then you just mail it off like a postcard. So it's just one small way that you can go ahead and try and advocate. Disability rights, we talk to them quite frequently. We follow some of their pieces of legislation, Mainland, where I am from. And there's also, most of this information came from the path of legislation in Maine, and here is that web address. So that pretty much concludes my presentation. Are there any questions?
I don't see any questions in the chat box, but if anybody has any and you'd like to ask them right now of Shannon, then this is a golden opportunity. We are recording this, so we will post it again. I do have somebody who has a raised hand. So Michael, I don't know if you can speak, or do I have to unmute you? I don't know that. Let me allow to talk. All right, see if you can do it now, Michael.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, just a quick question. Are you using the Autism Society of Maine stationery whenever you're contacting the representatives, or is it coming from, say, my own private letterhead?
Well, when I reached out to Congresswoman Shelley Pingree, that was just me, because we were doing it as a group through Mainland. So no, I didn't use any stationery. I just, like I said, I went to the website, filled out the form. I did put that I was with a group with Mainland and so forth, but no, I didn't use any stationery. You don't necessarily have to. You can contact them as a private citizen.
Okay.
Yeah, and if somebody's interested and they really, sometimes it's the power of the people. So
Mhm.
sometimes you can have a group of people and you're all interested in that. You might be a parent who's has some issues with some of the adult services, or maybe it's a younger child and it's the Department of Education. So sometimes getting together with a bunch of people and looking at some bills and submitting something as a group, it works out really well too.
And I have to agree, because when we met as a group with Mainland, it felt a little less stressful than if I was to do it by myself. It was nice having my Len friends with me, who might actually be in this webinar today, but no, it's nice. And you should, especially according to my social policy class for school, having allies, there is strength in numbers, and it does seem to get the message across a lot better, if you will, if you do go with more than one person.
And it seems a little scary, I think, legislation. I think it's because there's so many pieces to it. And as you could see with Sharon's presentation, which she did an excellent job, there is a lot to it and there's a lot behind it. And each session, we're in the long session right now that goes till the end of June. That's going to have well over 2,000 bills. That's a lot of bills. And then you get into next year's session, which we call the short session. It only goes to the middle of April. That's going to have only emergency bills, carryover bills. And I think there may be the opportunity to have a few bills in there outside of those, but the majority of it's that first session, the long session, where a lot of these bills get heard.
And I just want to put a plug. So the Autism Society, we have a legislation subcommittee, and you do not need to be on the board of directors to be on our committee. If you're interested in attending and learning more about the pieces of legislation we're following, that would be amazing. You just need to send Kathy an email that you would like to be added to our roster. I do send out emails once a week talking about pieces of legislation that we're following, updating them, seeing where they're at. We pretty much are sticking with state legislation right now. We have discussed maybe reaching out to our representatives in Washington, D.C. about federal pieces together.
And we also belong to a group with the Autism Society of America. We belong to the Public Policy and Advocacy Committee. I sit on that committee, and they meet once a month at the end of the month. And that's all about the federal bills that are going through. So we're kind of in the know when it comes to some bills that are struggling, some bills that are needing to have representatives. Sometimes they'll even reach out to me and say, hey, we know Senator Collins is on this committee. Could you reach out to her as your constituent, and as a constituent, I mean, and see if she would back this bill or try to get where she is or where she lies within that bill. So
And
does
just,
anybody,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
just seeing if anybody else had any other questions, and go ahead, Shannon.
No, I was just saying that when we had our meeting with Congresswoman Shelley Pingree's office, we did talk about a piece of federal legislation, which is known as the Home and Community-Based Services Access Act. It's also known as the HCBS Access Act. And it basically, what it would do is it would increase pay to the service workers who do those jobs. Most of them are minorities and they live in poverty to do those jobs. Those jobs are usually paid just above minimum wage. So it's supposed to, enforce that workforce to want to go out and do the BHP jobs or the DSP jobs and those types of jobs. It would also increase the quality of training that they get, so they do feel supported with that type of work. It's also there's supposed to be some kind of support for family caregivers as well, but they didn't really get into the nitty-gritty of that part.
So if anybody has no other questions, then like I said, this is going to be recorded. We're going to be putting it up on our website, and we'll announce it on the Facebook. You can certainly reach out to Shannon. Shannon, did you have a last slide with your information, or did we not do that?
I didn't do that. Sorry.
So what we can do is, do you want to put it in the chat box, Shannon, your email?
Yep.
I think you can have access to type in the chat box just in case people have questions or they might want to ask you something. That way they'll have your information there. So if nobody else has anything, we'll let Shannon put something in the chat box, and then we will conclude for today. And there's Shannon's email popping up now. So if any of you want it, please write it down. And then we will, like I said, have this up on our website, so you'll be able to view it if you missed something or you wanted to gain something. I'm also going to try to send everybody out a copy of the PowerPoint, because there's a lot of great links that bring you to different places. So I will try to get that out to you. It probably won't go out till next week, I'm going to be honest, because we do have our Walk for Autism happening this weekend and we're getting prepared for that. But by next week, I should be able to at least get some things out. So be patient.
Thank you, everyone. And
All right.
appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for
Thanks.
joining us.